And all of a sudden, my captain, he's asking me, well, hey, Chris, do you see that object ahead of us as well? So I started looking out of my window more closely. And then indeed, I saw something just flying ahead of us. And this is the object that I saw. And for the longest time, we were just wondering, what kind of airplane is this? Because there was no airplane reported ahead of us. There was nothing on TCAS. So that's like a system we have on board all commercial airplanes that registers other airplanes in our vicinity. And we were just looking at it. It didn't seem to have any engines. It didn't seem to leave a contrail. It didn't seem to have a tail, which is something you normally see with another airplane.
Normally.
So, and basically, we saw this thing for over an hour or maybe 55 minutes.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Chris Lehto, welcome to LehtoFiles.
Hi, welcome to the show. I'm Chris Lehto, retired F-16 pilot. Now I investigate UAPs, and I have an exciting guest today, fellow pilot. I'm always happy to chat with a fellow pilot. And Christiaan Van Heijst has been flying 747s for many years now. He has almost 10,000 hours, and he's a award-winning photographer as well in the air. And he has some amazing UAP stories to share with us tonight. He's also been in the European Union Parliament. So there has been some exciting happenings happening in the background. So thanks for being here, Christiaan.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris. It's an honor.
Excellent. You started flying gliders. And I remember from my own experience that flying a glider was actually the funnest flying I ever did. Do you miss flying gliders?
I did indeed start with flying gliders. The problem is in the Netherlands, even in summer, it's not really that thermal. So my flights were often limited to 8 to 10 minutes maximum. And I would be on the road for almost 2 days just to get 1 or 2 of those little flights. So pretty soon I switched to motorized flying because especially in not really optimal weather, it was actually more flying hours per days invested. But yeah, it was great fun. And especially in retrospect, you really learn how to fly an airplane just by managing your energy in a glider. And a couple of years back, I actually joined a friend of mine, a colleague. He has his own glider, and just being in control of such an elegant airplane again. It's same but different compared to the bigger equipment I'm flying these days.
For me, it was weird how quiet it was. It's just so quiet. There's no loud engines or anything,
Yeah. Well, even though the rush of the air can be quite loud, but it's just so peaceful. I completely agree.
And this is one of your amazing photographs. So I'm guessing this is a 747?
Yeah, that's correct. This is one of the award-winning images I took a couple of years ago. I always use wide-angle lenses in the cockpit, which is basically, I was forced to start using wide-angle lenses because the cockpit windows are so thick and layered. It's very difficult to zoom through those windows and get a sharp image. So I was forced to use wide-angle lenses. And then by accident, I came upon these amazing angles in the back of the cockpit. And using some long exposures, you get these really almost science fiction-like images. So this is part of an award-winning series, and it's just mesmerizing. Yeah, I'm not sure if you've ever been in the cockpit of a 747, but it's actually very cramped. It's a very small cockpit compared to the rest of the airplane. Wow. But with this angle, it looks like it's a space shuttle. So
interesting. And do you enjoy flying the 747?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's one of the most beautiful airplanes, and the airplane is just such a joy to fly. It's an airplane with a specific character, let's say, and especially compared to the 737 that I've flown before, it's just an amazing airplane. It's great fun.
Well, excellent. So did that lead you into UAP phenomena? How did you actually come to enter the phenomena, this crazy field we're in?
Well, the photography stands completely alone from the whole UAP topic. Basically, since my first flying lessons, I was just so amazed by the magical flight and just the beautiful views from up there. So already from a young age, I started carrying small cameras with me just to capture the clouds and the landscapes. And as my aviation career progressed, the camera equipment became better and better. And nowadays, it's just a parallel career next to flying. So it has nothing to do with the UAP topic in general. The funny thing is, I've seen 4 things in the beginning part of my career that I still cannot explain. And for the longest time, I just dismissed it as it must be something military, because especially for commercial pilots, if we see something that we cannot identify, it's just the go-to answer. It's something military. And it was only after I saw the interviews with Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Ryan Graves, where they discussed their sightings and even explained the things that a lot of Navy pilots have been seeing, that I realized that they were describing stuff that I've seen as well. And if these Navy pilots came to the conclusion that it's not theirs, then I was forced to reevaluate my own sightings again. So to be honest, I was never really interested in the topic at all. And I think it was late 2020, I decided to dive into the subject, and basically with the mission to debunk the whole UAP topic within 2 weeks, because I thought the answers would be pretty obvious and simple, especially with my background in photography. I thought I could reasonably explain some of these things I've been seeing. Yeah, and now we're here. I basically came to the conclusion that the stuff that I've seen, the 4 sightings that we'll discuss later on, are really anomalous. And at the same time, I started to get a bit worried about flight safety aspect as well, especially since these spy balloons were sighted over the United States and Canada.
Yep.
I realized that there's sometimes just equipment or stuff flying in our airspace that's not supposed to be there. And as pilots, we're on the first line of defense when we can actually spot stuff in the airspace around us. So yeah, I was just convinced that it was important for me to come forward with my sightings just to get rid of the stigma, because there's such a stigma around the whole topic, and it prevents pilots from reporting physical stuff that they see in the same airspace where we're flying. So yeah, long story short, but that's my my background story in the sense of UAP.
All right. So then what are the sightings? You mind running through them?
Yeah, sure. I've had 4 sightings in the beginning of my career that I still find difficult to explain. The first sighting was back in, I think it was 2005. It was one of my first flights as a co-pilot on the Fokker 50. And I was flying with an instructor. It was still my line training, so it was really brand new. And we were flying at night in between 2 cloud layers over southern Germany. And all of a sudden, I see just to the left and in front of our airplane, a bright light falling, moving basically vertically down. And it disappeared into the cloud layer below, and it actually illuminated the cloud layer as well as it fell through. And I remember my instructor, captain, was basically saying, "Whoa, what was that?" And I thought, you're the instructor. You're supposed to know what's happening out there. And for the longest time, I was just wondering what it could have been. Maybe a ball lightning or a lightning strike. But the funny thing was there was no significant weather around us. There was no thunderstorms around us. And it was just one bright light falling vertically down, and it disappeared. And that was it. There were no other lights or falling lights that I've ever seen during that flight or afterwards. So that was the first time I've seen something funny.
Could it have been like a meteor? I know you mentioned these cases or these sightings at the European Union Parliament. Could it have been a meteor?
No. I'm pretty convinced it wasn't a meteor. I've seen thousands, literally thousands of meteors. They always enter the Earth's atmosphere in a certain angle, and they burn up in the atmosphere, leaving a trail, sometimes a contrail, smoke trail. In this case, it was a bright light moving vertically down at a constant speed, but an incredible speed. I will tell you later. And it didn't leave any sort of trail, or it didn't change in intensity. What often happens with meteors, they change in intensity as they burn up. And I've never seen a meteor this close to the ground, because we were flying at, I think, 20,000 feet. And pretty much all of the meteors I've seen so far, they were burning up really high in the atmosphere above us. So I'm pretty sure this was not a meteor, and it was actually moving a bit too slow, I think. The funny thing is, if you don't mind me explaining a second sighting as well, which was a couple of years later. Yeah, it was a couple of years later when I was flying the 737. We were flying from somewhere in Greece back to Amsterdam. And it was a clear blue sky. It was just somewhere in summer. It was broad daylight, no clouds, no thunderstorms. And my colleague and I, we suddenly see a same sort of bright light falling or moving vertically down into the Adriatic Sea, roughly 10 to 20 kilometers ahead and left of our flight track. It was only after I saw that second falling light that I realized that the light I've seen years before on the Fokker 50 was also such a strange phenomenon. And in this case, I was absolutely sure that it couldn't have been a lightning strike, because there was absolutely no cloud anywhere near us. It was just a clear blue sky, visibility unlimited. And the light in this case, we saw it entering our vision or how do you say this? It basically became visible the moment it dropped into the window frame. So the moment we saw it, it was basically an angle, and we estimated it to be roughly at 60,000 feet the moment it became visible. And it fell with a constant speed vertically down and disappearing into the Adriatic Sea within, let's say, 1.5 or 2 seconds. And a quick calculation on the back of my hand showed me that it was moving at a speed of roughly 30,000 kilometers an hour if it was disappearing from, let's say, 60,000 feet to sea level in such a short time, which is roughly Mach 30. And it didn't leave a contrail, it didn't leave a smoke trail. And the moment it disappeared into the sea, it was just gone. There was not a bright flash, there was no splash, even though, I mean, it could have been there, but it was just too far away for us to see. And it was gone. Within 1.5 seconds, you see something and it disappears into the sea. And in both cases, both of us in the cockpit, we saw the light falling, or we saw whatever it was falling into the sea below or into the clouds below.
And the environmentals, this was at night?
The light over Germany was at night, and the light we saw over Greece was just during broad daylight.
Broad daylight, wow.
Broad daylight, yeah. And the funny thing is, it was just a very bright light, and I've no clue if it was an object emanating light or if it just was a plasma sphere or anything like that. I have no clue. It was just a bright light, and that was it. Pure white. It wasn't pulsating. It was not flickering. It was pure white, and it was like gone within 2 seconds.
And you've also seen meteors, and they just look nothing like that, I guess. What does a meteor generally look like? They're usually green, aren't they?
Sometimes they're green, sometimes they're white. I've seen some orange yellow ones as well, and they often, like the relatively known shooting stars that we see in movies. It's just like a small streak or short streak and going really fast, and most of the time it's just burning up in the upper atmosphere. Sometimes it happens that especially the larger ones, they leave a huge contrail, and sometimes you actually see the smoke dissipating as well. But they often start to glow really bright and then slowly disappear. And in this case, the lights I've seen, they were just constant white lights, not pulsating, not changing in intensity, just nothing.
And no smoke. I mean, if it's burning up, if it's going that fast, 30,000 miles an hour, it must be some sort of trail, some sort of smoke trail of some kind, if it was just burning.
Yeah, and as I said, it was moving vertically down, and I've never seen a meteor falling vertically down. They most of the time they enter the atmosphere under an angle of 20 to 30 degrees, I think, maximum. And I don't know. I've no clue what it is.
What did your co-pilot say at the time?
Well, I was still a co-pilot back then.
You were the co-pilot, yeah.
But this flight, the 737, it was a female captain, and basically I'm still in touch with her, and she still remembers the sighting. And both of us, we were looking at the light or whatever it was, and we said, "Wow, what's that? That's just weird." I instantly asked the air traffic controller, the Greek air traffic controller, if there was any military activity going on, because the first fear we have is that there might be some military activity, like a missile launch or military exercise, and we might be infringing in their airspace or whatever. But the air traffic controller immediately replied, "So no, there's no activity. Just." He didn't really say it out loud, but he basically said, "Well, don't bother me with whatever you see there." So he dismissed it immediately, and that was it. We were just left clueless.
Yeah, 30,000 miles per hour. I mean, that's really fast. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, this was just a rough estimate because we have no clue where it was, how far away it was. But let's say if it became visible at roughly 60,000 feet, it might have originated much higher. 60,000 feet to sea level within 1.5 to 2 seconds. You can make your own calculation. It's incredibly fast. Yeah,
that's impressive. Yeah, did you guys at the time even consider reporting it, or any thoughts on that?
No, I have no clue where I should report it. I think that the first sighting was 2005. The second sighting I just mentioned was 2010, if I'm not mistaken. I have no clue where I should report it or what to do with it. And besides that, I wasn't even remotely interested in UAP or the whole topic. I didn't even register it as a UAP. For me, it was just weird, strange.
Yes, definitely. Oh, interesting. Oh, great. What's the third one then?
The third one that was also from the cockpit of a Fokker 50 turboprop. It was also over Greece, and it was, I can look up the dates, but I'm pretty sure it was 2005 or 2006. We just landed at one of the small islands with a small airstrip, And it was in the middle of the night. There was no moon. There was just a beautiful starry night. You could see all the stars, thousands of them. And my captain and I, at the same time, we see a very bright light appearing in the sky ahead of us, really, really far, really high. And it was almost like planet Venus. I'm not sure if you ever seen planet Venus. It's a very bright light, and it's really stood out against all of the other stars. So this light suddenly appears, it disappeared, it reappeared again, disappeared, reappeared again, and it was making like a stuttering motion. And the fourth time it reappeared, it just shut off instantly, and there was no acceleration. It was instant speed, and it just disappeared among the stars. I'm saying it disappeared among the stars because I have no clue how high it was. I have no clue how far it was. Whatever it was making a really strange appearing, reappearing, stuttering motion, and then instant speed. It was not even instant acceleration. It was instant speed, hypersonic, whatever it was gone.
Wow.
And the funny thing was, as I said, as commercial pilots, our go-to answer is, well, it must be something military, because that very night, there was a huge part of the airspace south of Greece closed because the USS Theodore Roosevelt and the US carrier fleet, is that the right name? Yeah, so the USS Theodore Roosevelt, together with a couple of cruisers or whatever they have, was transiting just south of Greece on its way to the Persian Gulf. So, and we knew about this because the airspace was closed, and we were being briefed before the flight about those kind of closures. So the moment we saw that light stuttering and making strange movements, we thought, well, it's probably connected to the aircraft carrier passing by.
Yeah.
And I have no clue if it was. It might have been a coincidence, but it was really, really weird. And in the moment you see something like that, just a stuttering light is already strange because, as pilots, we see satellites all the time. We see the ISS. We see so much stuff in the night sky. But this was just weird. I've never seen anything like it. And then the instant speed when it was shooting away, you're like, wow, what the heck is that?
That's interesting because I interviewed Robert Powell. He's actually the founder of the SCU, the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies. And I asked him, what's the one key aspect you look for non-human intelligence or something extraterrestrial? And he said acceleration. Basically impossible acceleration. That's what he looks for, because we can't do that with our current technology. So it's interesting that you see that in person. That's what you noted, is this kind of insane acceleration that just doesn't happen normal day to day.
Yeah, exactly. And if it was just a stuttering light, it might have been an interesting sighting, but I could maybe explain it away for myself as a satellite or I don't know, something. But the instant speed, which is often reported by other phenomena as well, it's mind-blowing. And I've never seen anything like it since. It was really, really quite something.
Wow. I mean, I didn't see any of these things. You have many more hours than I have. I don't even have 2,000, but they're fighter hours, up to 10,000 hours. That's amazing. You saw 3 just in their early career.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that the 4 sightings that I nowadays actually regard as genuinely anomalous only happened in the first couple of years of my flying career. I must say, since 2020, I've been seeing a lot of pulsating lights in the night sky and sometimes strange moving lights, and those lights are being reported by thousands of pilots. I'm very reluctant to label them UAP or to label them as something anomalous, because especially since the war in Ukraine and nowadays the tensions in the Middle East, there is a lot of activity in low Earth orbit and a lot of satellites being launched all the time. And actually, this is something I can see with my camera as well, because, I'm specialized in those long exposure photography from the cockpit. And what I often do is I put the camera on the glare shield and I let it run for 20, 30 seconds. So you see all the stars. And when I look at the raw files back on my computer, especially if the airplane is nice and stable, you see dozens of satellites passing by, most of them not even visible for the naked eye, but the camera sensor is so sensitive that it captures just basically everything that emits any light. So you see, especially if you have some really long exposures, sometimes 20, 30 satellites passing by in the night sky. So I'm pretty sure there's a lot of military activity, a lot of activity in low Earth orbit, maybe spy satellites, communication satellites, you name it. So those pulsating lights, I'm not convinced it's anomalous. I think especially now with Starlink, especially with all the Starlink satellites being dispersed into this grid, I don't know what kind of motion they have. Maybe they're tumbling, but I can imagine that a lot of satellites, when they're tumbling or moving, are reflecting light, maybe in a pulsating way. So I'm very reluctant to call them UAP, honestly. But then again, I mean, I might be mistaken. As I said, the really strange sightings I had were in the first couple of years of my flying career. Yeah.
And yeah, let's go to the fourth where you actually have an image.
Yeah, I'm the first to admit it's underwhelming, but at least
I don't think so. I mean,
yeah, this was a very interesting sighting, and this one actually stayed with me for a long time. To give you some background information, this was during a flight from Amsterdam to Malaga in the southern part of Spain, just after sunset. So as you can see, the sun is already below the horizon, and the clouds below give a nice contrast. We were flying with a 737 at 41,000 feet, which is relatively high. There's not much other commercial traffic flying at those altitudes or much higher. And the moment we entered Spanish airspace, the air traffic controller gave us direct routing to Malaga, because basically we were the only ones in this airspace. So we don't have to follow those airways. We can just save some time and fuel by flying direct. And all of a sudden, my captain, he's asking me, well, hey, Chris, do you see that object ahead of us as well? So I started looking out of my window more closely. And then indeed, I saw something just, flying ahead of us. And this is the object that I saw. And for the longest time, we were just wondering, what kind of airplane is this? Because there was no airplane reported ahead of us. There was nothing on TCAS. So that's like a system we have on board all commercial airplanes that registers other airplanes in our vicinity. And it shows up on our navigation display if there's any other traffic. On this case, there was nothing showing up. And we were just looking at it. It didn't seem to have any engines. It didn't seem to leave a contrail. It didn't seem to have a tail, which is something you normally see with another airplane.
normally.
So for about 10, 15 minutes, we were looking at this thing. And let's say if it was another contrail, sometimes it happens that you look into the back of another contrail, it starts to dissipate, it starts to grow or move. In this case, it was just straight ahead of us, very high.
Yeah.
And it didn't make any sense. So after 10, 15 minutes, I just contacted Madrid Air Traffic Control, and I was asking him, well, what kind of airplane is it flying ahead of us? Because, we're just curious. And he immediately came back to me. He said, well, what are you talking about? You're the only ones flying there. So I said, well, I see this. It looks like an airplane, pretty far away, just straight ahead of us, and flying at a significant altitude, like 50, 60,000 feet. And we were just wondering what it is. So he was stunned. And after 2 or 3 minutes, he came back to me over the radio frequency. He said, well, would you mind contacting this and this frequency of the military air traffic control? Because they are very interested in your sighting now as well. So on the secondary VHF radio, I called military air traffic control in Spain. And the guy was very interested. He took me very serious. And I just explained to him, said, well, we see something flying, hovering ahead of us. It's already there for 20 minutes now. It's not changing direction or shape or relative distance. And we just wonder what it is, because, it's flying ahead of us. So he immediately confirmed there was no military traffic, no commercial traffic known to be ahead of us, no weather balloons, nothing, just absolutely nothing that he could identify. So that was very interesting, because we saw this object, which was almost like the shape and the size of a grain of rice, held at arm's length. And both military and civilian air traffic control had no clue what it was. So, and basically, we saw this thing for over an hour, or maybe 55 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was finally able to get my camera out and take at least 2 pictures. Unfortunately, it wasn't really the best camera I had back then. This was 2010 or 11, if I'm not mistaken. But at least I was able to take 2 pictures. And that was it. So, and the moment, it was about 55 minutes later, we start the approach for Malaga. We make a turn towards the east. And at roughly 20,000 feet, we descend into the clouds below. And at that moment, I saw the object just out of my right-hand window, because we made a 90-degree turn. And it was still hovering or flying there at a really high altitude. And by that moment, it must have been somewhere over Africa, because Malaga is in the southern part of Spain. And the moment, as I said, the moment I lost sight of it, it was still very high and very far away. So whatever it was, I don't know what it was. It was flying extremely high, and it was unidentified, literally.
That's insane. And it didn't change perspective. It didn't seem to get larger or smaller as
No.
this whole hour almost went on.
Yeah, so for the full hour, it was exactly the same shape, size, and relative distance. So for me, that was very strange as well, because you would expect, let's say, it could have been maybe an older airplane or maybe a balloon, whatever, that's basically flying at the same speed, constantly ahead of us. So
Yeah.
for over an hour, you were covering almost 1,000 kilometers. It would be
Yeah.
something that was basically not really chasing us, but at least following us along. Or it must have been an absolutely massive object that was stationary, flying, hovering somewhere over Africa. I've absolutely no clue what it could be. And as I
If you
said,
flew 1,000 kilometers, I mean,
yeah,
I don't see how that could even be possible. If it would change size, wouldn't it? Unless it's
yeah,
just enormous.
yeah, I was still left with a question mark on what this could have been. And again, for the longest time, I I dismissed it as something military, and it was only since 2020, 21, I started diving into the subject, and I just dived in my archives again to try and find this picture. Unfortunately, I still had it, but yeah,
Wow,
weird.
that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
just an amazing story. I mean, I honestly cannot think of what that could be, because it would have to be flying the same speed as you were in a 737 at this time?
Yeah, yeah, we were flying Mach.
41,000 feet. Mach
Yeah,
8?
yeah. So the normal cruise speed for the 737 is about 0.79, 0.78 Mach. So that's
Yeah.
roughly 850 kilometers an hour. And yeah, we were flying at 41,000 feet, and we estimated that whatever this thing was flying at 50, 60,000 feet, something like that.
Or even higher if it's further away.
Yeah, and some people have asked me, well, this if it could have been maybe a satellite or something. But the problem is, as you see in this picture as well, it's backlit. So whatever it is, it's in our atmosphere, and we see the
Yeah.
shadow side of it. And any kind of satellite or object in low Earth orbit would reflect light, and you would see it as a dot of light. In this case, it's something solid was blocking the light.
And it couldn't be a weather phenomena, because how is it moving with you for almost an hour?
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
you tell me. I've never seen a cloud so isolated at such a high altitude and so solid. Because sometimes you have those layers with ice crystals, the cirrus clouds, and they're very translucent. Actually, it's a very thin layer. But whatever this is, it's solid.
Wow, it's amazing. That's an amazing story and image. I'm glad you still kept it after all
Yeah.
these years. I mean, 14 years.
I never throw anything away, so my whole hard drive is filled to the brim with all kind of pictures I never do anything with. But at least I kept this one. Actually, I took two of them in succession, and they're pretty much similar. Actually, they're basically just exactly the same. But I'm happy I kept this one.
Wow. And what was the response at the EU Parliament? I know you briefed this as well.
Yeah.
What did you find the response was?
Very open. It was very interesting
Yeah.
to see the people that were present there. They were pretty read into the whole subject. And at that moment itself, I didn't get any specific feedback, but especially later on, I heard from many people that they really appreciated the talk, both from me and from the other guests. Yeah, sharing their stories, and I noticed that my experience as a pilot, and especially my background as a pilot, was very appreciated, because I'm just focused on literally the flight safety aspect now, whatever it is. And especially with this picture, I could show that there are sometimes there are things in my airspace, and sometimes even pretty close to my airplane. Yeah, I just want to make sure that these kind of things can be reported and can be analyzed, maybe even.
I know there was a question, the discussion came up about actually reporting these, if there's any way to report UAPs. And there was a member there. He said there is a way to report, but you'd obviously never heard of it. Did anything come of that?
Yeah, but unfortunately, this gentleman from EASA, he left just after he posed a question, and it's only afterwards that at least I was still able to post my response. It was only afterwards that I realized that he was talking about reporting safety-related things in aviation, and he's completely right. There is always a way to report safety-related things, but in this case, it was not safety-related, and it's not specific for UAP. So I think it would be very interesting if one day EASA, and maybe in the United States, the FAA would allow a certain reporting system for specifically UAP. For example, in this case, if I would report this, or maybe the moving lights I discussed before, if I would write a report saying, well, I saw a funny light moving in the sky. Well, yeah, nobody can do anything with that. It's like, well, happy for you, but yeah, thanks for your report, but yeah, it's kind of useless. So if we really want to take this subject seriously, and if we really want to analyze those kind of sightings, it has to be a dedicated UAP reporting form or reporting system that has to be managed, I think.
There was also a discussion on, does it need to be different for the general public, a form, or commercial pilots? And everyone, I think, agreed that commercial pilots are just much better observers, just so much more used to actually looking outside, seeing things from that perspective. If you imagine people that aren't pilots see everything from the ground, where you can't even really see that far from the ground, just based on the curvature of the earth. But pilots such as yourself, you're flying 41,000 feet for thousands and thousands of hours, and tasked to look outside to clear for the flight, etc. It seems like that would be a great way to get good UAP data, is actually asking the pilots to turn this stuff in.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's a good point. Pilots in general are credible observers, not because we're really special or because we fly airplanes. It's because we look out of our windows with a purpose. We look out of our windows to spot other objects, to spot other airplanes, and that's also why my colleague and I, in all cases, we constantly saw those moving lights immediately, because many people have probably seen it, but airplanes always have those flickering strobe lights on, all kinds of navigation lights, etc. And those are installed on airplanes. So as pilots, we can identify other aircraft in our vicinity. So the moment I see something flickering, even from the corner of my eye during flight, I immediately look at it and I want to identify what kind of airplane is it? Is it flying close by? What kind of altitude is it flying? Because it's basically part of my job. And in this case, if I see something like a moving light or a solid object even, and I cannot identify it, it has to be taken serious per definition. And don't get me wrong, I could be mistaken. It could be a new weather phenomenon. It could be a balloon. It could be a drone. That's all fine with me. But the moment a pilot is reporting something and generally has no clue what he's seen, it has to be taken serious. And as I said before, for example, these spy balloons over the US and Canada, I'm pretty sure they've been spotted by hundreds of pilots before they were actually tracked by NORAD. So it really showed there was a massive object the size of a bus, if I'm not mistaken, that was floating for almost 4 or 5 weeks in the airspace where airplanes are flying as well. So for me, this was just a clear sign that there has to be a way for pilots to report these kind of things, because it's a matter of time before there's a serious safety issue.
And when we were chatting before we started recording, it sounded like there was some sort of movement going on in the background. Do you think the meeting will have any impact to make any sort of changes?
Maybe long term. I'm pretty sure this is a marathon we're running and not a sprint. I have been approached by some people who have seen the briefings we gave and who were present, and it showed me that the subject is taken quite seriously behind the screens, and that's very nice to see. On the short term, I don't expect any miracles to happen, but I think at least we made the first step, and we have started to create some awareness about flight safety and the UAP topic in general. And I think it's little baby steps we have to take, but it shows that there's more and more interest from serious sides to this UAP topic.
Brian Graves, he spoke and mentioned that they're passing a bill. At least it's introduced a bill in January, or I think it's called Americans for Safe Aerospace. The bill actually, which would ultimately do that, is provide some sort of avenue for pilots to report UAPs. Maybe if that happens in the US, then Europe can follow suit.
Yeah, definitely. Since I came forward about my sightings, I've been approached by the UAP Coalition Netherlands, a non-profit organization, and I'm now part of the UAP Coalition Netherlands as one of the ambassadors to talk about this subject. And with the UAP Coalition Netherlands, we're in contact with Ryan Graves' organization, and hopefully one day in the future we can combine our efforts. Not saying that we have to work under the same umbrella, but if ASA manages to set up a system or a database where pilots can report their sightings, I think it would be very beneficial if we have an almost similar system here in Europe in place. So we can easily exchange maybe data or analyze the same kind of reportings and sightings. And at least we start from the same framework instead of just building something up from scratch again and reinventing the wheel.
Was it difficult to speak out on this topic? I know that the stigma is still huge. Have you received any backlash or any negative effects from speaking out?
No, well, at least not in my face. I'm not sure what people are saying behind my back. Honestly, I don't really care. For me, I very deliberately only focus on the flight safety aspect of it because it's genuinely something that I'm quite worried about, especially after the things I've seen and this solid object that I've saw for an hour. So by focusing simply on the flight safety aspect, I don't see much harm. The funny thing is that a lot of my own colleagues and also pilots that I don't know personally have approached me and shared their own experiences. Some are pretty similar to what I've seen, like moving lights, strange behaving lights in the distance. But also some pilots have shared their personal stories with me with some really, really close encounters in the sense of something appearing next to their cockpit or flying parallel with them, or sometimes shooting away, accelerating with extreme speeds, or showing really strange behavior. And those pilots, they are faced with this stigma, and they're so afraid of sharing it that they are, sometimes they've cropped it up for many years. And they approach me and they love to share their story because they know I'm not going to laugh about them. And it's for many pilots that have seen something, it's kind of liberating even. And it's funny because among my own colleagues, almost all of them, they know that I'm talking about this subject. And it's a rough estimate that I think 35% of the pilots sometimes have seen something during their career that they cannot explain. I've no clue what kind of sightings they were, but roughly 1/3 of the pilots have seen something that they cannot explain. And it's my estimation that about 1/3 generally doesn't even want to know. And it was very interesting. I was flying with a co-pilot not too long ago, and we were flying one of those night flights for a couple of hours, and we dimmed all the cockpit lights, and we were just enjoying all the stars and seeing the Milky Way and shooting stars. And so we started talking about the universe and life out there. So it's normal topics that sometimes arise. And actually, he confided to me. He said, "Well, I really hope I will never see anything in the night sky that I cannot explain," because for him it was like such a scary thought to see something that he couldn't identify. And it was a very interesting discussion. And actually, it showed me that this might be a barrier for some people to literally, how do you say this, like shut themselves off from actually seeing something, because it's just such a shock to realize there might be something out there that they cannot explain. So who knows, there might be quite some pilots who've seen something and they go in full denial mode because they just don't want to think about it.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. And I mean, what benefit can it bring? It's not going to help your career, and you're only going to be faced against the stigma. So I could really see how that could be an issue. But if you've shown you've had the courage to speak out, and I think you already were posting your photography, which must have helped. You're used to being at least in the public eye. But yeah, so courageous, man. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and speaking out on this topic.
Yeah, I think it helps that I already had a reputation, at least as a photographer and as a pilot. I'm pretty active on social media, so people know me, at least my followers know me from my serious work. Yeah, and as I said before, I really try to stay away from the little green man and the flying saucer stuff, because I think this is really making it difficult to get rid of the stigma. As I said, I'm just sticking to what I've seen, and especially this case as something that I was able to document, an object that was flying at extreme altitude, that was flying for an hour just ahead of us, and
For an hour.
Yeah, still no clue what it is. I mean, I think the picture speaks for itself.
I mean, that's just an amazing photo, amazing story, Christiaan. Anything else you'd like to share?
Not yet. I think my story is already quite known with people who are keeping track of the UAP topic for the last couple of years. I do feel that, as I said, especially now with the UAP Coalition Netherlands, the topic is slowly getting more and more mainstream. And I'm really looking forward to where it's all going in the next couple of years, because, it seems to be getting a lot of attention in political arenas worldwide. And I'm just looking forward to see where this topic is going. And yeah, let's see if we can improve flight safety as well with some kind of a reporting system, or maybe a way where pilots or other professionals can just report their experiences. And let's hope we can analyze the data that gathers, because only with data can we start making analysis, and that's the only way to go forward, I think.
Oh, excellent. Well said. And if anyone wants to check out Christian's actual photography, you can just search Christiaan Van Heijst and it comes up JPC Van Heijst. And you'll see his beautiful photography there. Check out his work. So thanks so much for coming on the show. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having me, Chris. It was an honor.
Excellent.